everybody. I am HP Holo. I write books, and occasionally I interview other people who write books. And today I am interviewing Monalisa Foster, whose latest is Threading the Needle, which I'm about halfway through and I love so much. So, sorry for starting late, by the way, everyone. We've had some technical difficulties, as you can tell, because Monalisa is not moving. And so she is going to be audio only, but we're still going to have a whole lot of fun. And so, Monalisa, we'll kick it off, and I'll let you introduce yourself and your book and anything you want readers to know, where they can find you, anything like that.
All righty. This is me with the deer caught in the headlights look on permanent display. And I'm Monalisa Foster. I am the author of Threading the Needle. That's my latest release. I write mostly space opera, although I have dabbled in other aspects of science fiction like military SF and hard SF. As you may know, my background is in physics. At one time, I wanted to be an astrophysicist,
Oh, wow.
but I ended up in engineering and medicine because I liked money. And I didn't want to be in school forever. So I specifically worked in the semiconductor industry at one time. And then I moved on to working in radiation oncology, interventional radiology, and nuclear medicine.
Oh.
I will be at Fantasy in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina in March. I will also be at LibertyCon in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I believe that's in June.
That sounds right. I'm going to be at both of those.
And DragonCon in Atlanta this year as well. And then people can find my books on the Baen website, as well as my own website, which is monalisafoster.com, and all the other, usual places, including libraries.
So, and I believe in the event description, I have links to your website, to the Baen website. So those who are watching on YouTube and Facebook specifically, because for whatever reason, Twitter doesn't allow me to do event descriptions, go there. You can click and buy and have a good time clicking things. So yeah. All right. So Threading the Needle. What's it about?
It is about Talia Merritt, who is a woman that used to be a military sniper, and she has emigrated to a new planet in order to start her life over. And she's looking for freedom and liberty, and finally getting to live her life after surviving this terrible war. And of course, things don't go her way. She goes there to help a friend, and he doesn't want her help. He tells her to go away. So she turns down the job that would have been almost like a dream job for her. It wouldn't involve killing. It would just involve teaching other soldiers how to shoot. It's out in the frontier, which is where she wants to go and start a new life. But she turns back around because she doesn't want to go up against her friend. And no matter what she does to stay out of this conflict, which involves terraformers and a corporate bigwig type of person who has a very, very different idea of what should be happening on Goruden. So no matter how much she tries to avoid this conflict, she ends up being drawn into it. And of course, she's the type of person who's not going to say no, or who's going to leave her friend to fight these bad guys on his own. So she takes up a mission to save him and the town that he's the sheriff of, and ultimately ends up saving the planet as well.
I like the high stakes. And I'm at the point in the novel now too where she's trying to not do this job, but people just keep coming at her, and it's like every time a new character shows up and wants to speak to her privately, I'm like, oh no. So yeah, it's really good thus far. Some things I want to say before we start our little chat. First off, we are running a contest where people who are watching, you can enter to win a signed copy of Threading the Needle. So again, if you want to enter to win that, you can go to the event description. I'm also going to put a link to the form in the chat so you can access it that way. But go fill out that form. We'll select a random winner after the show and then notify the winner, and you get a signed book from Monalisa. So that's pretty cool. Also, if you have any questions for Monalisa, leave them in the chat, and whenever we have breaks in the discussion, I will pick some questions and we will get answers for them. So let me actually pull the chat up so I can see where people are chatting. Oh, there's already people in the chat. So hello, John and Glenn. Thanks for joining us tonight. So my first question, Threading the Needle is ultimately a space Western, and that's one of my favorite genres. It's one that I would really like to see more of. Like, despite the fact that it's kind of beloved, you don't really see an incredible lot of it. But my question is, it's a beloved and perhaps somewhat unusual genre combination. And my questions are, why do you think it has such appeal to its enthusiastic fans? And what's the appeal for you personally?
Well, I think everybody likes to root for heroes, and it's the kind of milieu that allows us to do that. It's why I like it as a genre. It's very challenging to create a world where you can have that mix, that futuristic, we're in space mix alongside basically cowboys, and have it make sense. And that was one of my favorite things about writing this was having the milieu and the political background and all the other reasons meshed together to make it believable. And I grew up on this on Westerns, obviously not space Westerns, but I grew up on Westerns. We used to watch these very grainy, chopped up, heavily censored renditions of John Wayne and Errol Flynn movies that were dubbed in Hungarian and Romanian. So I grew up with what we used to call bokoi, because we didn't speak English at the time. We used to call them bokoi movies. So I knew who these characters were, even though at the time I didn't know the actors' names. So that idea of a frontier, I think, appeals to something in all of us. We want that sense of adventure and freedom and overcoming incredible odds, winning against the challenging adversary. You know, somebody, you want somebody to go up against who is worthwhile. It allows us, and it certainly allowed me, to live vicariously through people who are far more interesting than we are.
Cool. We're one question in. I've already lost track of my questions. So you've mentioned just a handful already, but what space operas and westerns and space westerns or just inspired you as you wrote this novel? And also, did any novels outside the space or western genre play a role?
So the most obvious one, obviously, is Firefly.
Oh, yeah.
I love Firefly and Serenity, both of them.
I was actually going to ask about those.
Oh yes. And I remember just an immense amount of pleasure from watching that series when it came out. I remember when I introduced my youngest daughter, to Firefly, and the look on her face when I told her there was only one season.
Oh.
I mean, she was like, I don't know, about maybe 10 or 12, and she almost cried. Because she was so much into it. The other one is Westworld, but let's talk about Firefly first.
Oh, yeah.
It has that Western, unapologetically Western in space feel to it. It has that mix of old and new, and that camaraderie aspect where you have these characters who have very obviously wounds that they carry with them, that they have survived. And of course, there's cows. I realized in Firefly there was only one episode involving cows, but cows become very important in Threading the Needle. But this was
We're going to have to talk about the space cows.
Yes, we are going to talk about space cows. Now, the other one, of course, is Westworld. In Westworld, you had the way they had the milieu set up was that this was an amusement park, and it catered to people who had this desire for a simpler, less technologically advanced way of life. And even though in that milieu, it was a theme park, and something that you played at. TTN or threading the needle is very, very real and very much not fake stakes. It's there's no reset button, there's no safety protocols. It's not a game. It's not where things are going to happen because there's a roll of the dice randomizing things. So those were two things that that I really liked about the genre. Now, as to things outside of the genre, not novels so much, but a lot of nonfiction. So, for example, geopolitical expert Peter Zeihan has some excellent books out on deglobalization and the influence of geography on historical outcomes, as well as how power is heavily influenced by geography. And for a science fiction writer, that is gold, because the milieu is so important.
That kind of stuff was my favorite coming up, because my dad was a geography teacher, and so I was fully immersed in geography and how it affected history and daily life even today and whatnot for all of my childhood. And so I absolutely love that kind of stuff.
You see, and the thing is, I was not aware of all of these things because, yes, I had history classes and yes, I had geography class, but I didn't get immersed in it. It wasn't something that was really on my curriculum. So for me, a lot of what Zeihan was saying was new in a lot of ways. And the other one was Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams's works on economics, which were also an influence in crafting the background in threading the needle, even though I don't really get into a lot of what happened on Earth and why it happened. I know why all of it happened and how it happened. And that may be something we would explore further down the road. But for this particular book, I stayed very much on this colony planet called Goruden.
It's so hard to gauge when you're done talking.
I'm sorry.
So there's going to be plenty of awkward pauses tonight while I figure out when Monalisa is finished. The setting actually brings up a question I didn't send you ahead of time, but I've read some of your other stuff too, and I've noticed that there tends to be a at least subtly Japanese motif that shows up in a lot of your writing, and I'm curious as to what the origin of that is.
I really like Japanese stuff. So I like the aesthetic. I like the Japanese aesthetic, whether it's the past or the present or even the future. In some of the photos that I have online, you see me with a sword. I actually started taking classes on how to use the Japanese sword, and it's a rue that was developed for World War II officers. So it wasn't necessarily what the samurai would be doing, because it was something that would take a lifetime to master, or at least a lot of years. The stuff that they were teaching in this particular rue had to do with being able to learn things very quickly and make a very quick end of your adversary. And I got into that because my kids were in karate class. And there were these guys beating on each other with bokens, which are wooden renditions of a samurai sword. And I'm like, and I was just fascinated by it. And the dojo owner goes, you're on the family plan. You could just join that class if you want. So that's what I did.
Cool.
So it's just something that I like. I like the samurai, obviously the myth of the samurai, and I've adapted them for the genetically engineered Donai in my other series. I chose it as the aesthetic for this book because cowboys and samurai go together.
Yes. There's a handful of novels that I've read that specifically combine cowboys and samurai, or at least a Western motif. And you have the whole, I was about to say Akira Toriyama, but that's not the right name. That's the Dragon Ball guy. You've got Kurosawa and how Seven Samurai and various films of his were adapted into Westerns. And I think the connection between Western and Japanese history is a really interesting thing. And so that's my curiosity. Before we continue, we actually have a question from one of our viewers. This is Glenn. Says, looking at your Amazon bio, interesting stops to get here. Why a sniper? And I assume that's, Glenn, you can clarify if I'm wrong, but I assume that means why decide to make Talia a sniper?
Well, we wanted to create a military specialty for her that made sense. And so there's historical precedent for female snipers in combat, and them doing very well in a lot of cases. So, what I had here was a lady of Japanese descent who wasn't an Amazon. So she was a diminutive kind of person, and in order to stick with things making sense and things, at least being somewhat realistic, I gave her this specialty that I knew historically had been performed by women.
Okay, finished. There's another one of those pauses. All right, that actually leads me into my next question, and honestly, this question could be a whole interview in and of itself. But I have these days strong female characters are kind of a dime a dozen, and very often they're really just obnoxious men with a female facade. But the ones that you write are very convincing and very often badass, while also being very believably female. And my question is, what's your technique for writing such believable, well-balanced, badass female characters?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. Okay, you don't know how much that means to me, because I really try to create a real person when I write. Okay, so I made a list, and you're right. This could be its own interviews. How do you write a believable female character without turning her into a caricature of the strong female character thing? All right. I don't make them girl bosses or queen bees. That's one of the things that I think makes for the wrong type of female character. Instead, I work to make them into people who are going to work with their allies and partners to solve a problem. I don't put a chip on their shoulder about being women in the first place. So I don't have them constantly trying to outman the men. And
that's something I appreciate so much about your writing too, because as a woman, naturally, I like to read about women characters doing cool stuff, but it takes me so out of the story when half the character's problem is, oh my gosh, people are oppressing me because I'm a woman. And I just, it's something that I really hate about strong female characterizations. So thank you for not doing that in your writing.
Well, thank you. And I know exactly how you feel. I get so tired of the constant, I am oppressed, I am marginalized. Yes, I am a Dr. Princess Astronaut Admiral, but women are still barefoot and pregnant all the time. No, that doesn't work, So that's another thing that I don't do, is I don't give them today's meat space cause du jour agenda. And I especially don't put it on the page. Instead, I just focus on them being real people who care about the people around them more than they care about advancing an ideology. And I think that if you do that, you don't really have to worry about, straying into this, this preaching that some of these female characters tend to do.
Yeah, and that's calling it preaching is a good thing, because that's the impression I come across. I come away with a lot of the entertainment that has the all caps strong female characters. I never feel like I'm watching an invented person. I feel like I'm watching a checklist, and it doesn't feel like a character that I want to root for, that I want to engage with. And I definitely want to root for and engage with Talia and everything she's doing. So all this to say, guys, if you are tired of the archetypical strong female character, go read Monalisa's stuff. Go read all of it, because it's wonderful. Um, all right. Let's see. Next question, unless you have more to add on that subject.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, we really could do a whole show. We can come back to it if we have time at the
Yes,
end.
we can.
Yeah.
At some point, this could be its own show too. Whenever we're at a con together, I need to talk with you about Blue Eye Samurai because, oh my gosh, yes.
Yes.
If we have time at the end of this, we may even talk about it there because talk about well done, strong female characters on all fronts. That's an excellent show, you guys. Now, speaking again of women and their roles in science fiction and related things, in your acknowledgement, the very first person you credit for the existence of your novel and your writing in general is Lee Brackett. And your acknowledgement actually answers this question already, but just for the sake of interview questions, what kind of influence did Lee Brackett specifically have on your writing?
All right, so my favorite Star Wars movie is Empire Strikes Back.
Oh yeah, that's mine too.
I am all over the whole princess and the pirate thing, and I think that was one of her contributions that stayed in the script, because the script that she wrote got rewritten several times, according to what I've read. And then she also wrote the movie that inspired this as well, which is the John Wayne movie El Dorado. Which it's a 1966. It's color, but it's an older movie, and she also wrote the script for that. So the interpersonal relationships, I think, is where she mostly influences my writing, and so you've got the banter between and the whole dynamic between Han and Leia. That's just so well characterized in that, but. Threading the Needle doesn't have a romance in it. Talia has a sniper partner, but there are no romantic. They don't have a romantic relationship. Their relationship is actually far more complicated. Oh yeah, and you see that also in the John Wayne movie, even though the movie itself leaves their background completely opaque. And that was one of the things when I sat down with this, I kind of wanted to flesh out Talia's background, and I do it through flashbacks throughout the book. And one of the things that has been written about Lee Brackett, specifically by Michael Moorcock, was, and I quote, "Her heroes are often deeply aware of some moral transgression which everyone forgives them for except themselves." Okay. And I think this is something that humanizes Talia. Yeah. In a lot of ways. The other thing that I think is important is something that Lee Brackett herself had said. And this is like throwing gasoline on the plot versus character-driven debate. But I'm going to go ahead and read her quote anyway. She says, "Plot is people. Human emotions and desires founded on the realities of life, working at cross purposes, getting hotter and fiercer as they strike against each other, until finally there's an explosion. That's plot."
That's a great way to describe it too. I love it.
Because you cannot decouple them. Plot is character and character is plot. The things that happen, which is what most people call plot, the events in the story, should come from the characters because they want to do something, or they need something, or they want to change something. And conversely, the events are going to influence the characters. You cannot decouple them. So I think Lee Brackett got me thinking in terms of there isn't necessarily something is plot driven or character driven. It's a spectrum. And your own stories are going to lie on that spectrum, sometimes delving more to one side and then sometimes to another. So for me, that as a writer, that was a great revelation, because I didn't want to take sides in the plot-driven versus the character-driven camps, right?
All right, let's see. My next question, I've got like a whole crazy page here, so I'm just going through and picking the fun ones. Let's see here. Now here's one for you. Now, the general setting of Threading the Needle is very obviously far future, even if areas of the immediate setting are so antiquated that like some don't even have electricity, or they have, if they do have electricity, it's like from generators. It's not a big system. So how did you decide for narrative and world building purposes what parts of the world would be advanced and what parts would be low tech? Did that world building come first, or did the story come first, or how did all that work?
Well, we knew we were going to need, and I'm using the royal we because I'm writing a manuscript where the character is using the royal we, so that's why it keeps creeping into my vocabulary tonight. Okay, sorry. I knew we were going to have space cows. Okay, so I knew that we needed a setting that it wasn't going to be in a laboratory. Obviously, it was going to be on a ranch or kind of an Old West setting. So I needed to set up the milieu to allow for that, and the reasons for why they're there, for why the cows are crucial to the story, and why the cows are solving the terraforming issue that is the point of contention in the book, was going to be solved via genetic engineering. But how do you have genetic engineering on a planet where most people are living like late 19th, early 20th century level of technology? Right. So for that part of it, I created an Earth where the genetic engineering took place. So the genetic engineering of the cows actually took place on Earth. They were shipped to Goruden, where they were let loose and bred and eventually did their thing to solve the problem on the planet. But I wanted to set up this milieu that would work with cowboys and samurai. So I set it up so that we have a place in the planetary capital of Sakura where we have a spaceport and a lot of technology that you and I would find very common in use. But then as you go out and you move out toward the frontier, it just becomes less technological.
Yeah.
And
like stepping back centuries.
Yes. And this is another reason why the background of where they were coming from and what happened on Earth is kind of crucial. And basically, not to spoil too much of it, they are coming from a dystopian world. But I didn't want to spend a lot of time in that dystopian world. I did not want to write a dystopian fantasy or a dystopian fiction. But back on Earth, we no longer have the large countries like China and Brazil and Canada and the US as large countries anymore. They have balkanized. They have fractured into multiple hegemonies, some of which are corporate, which is why I mentioned corporate nobility in the book. So even though it's been several hundred years from now, the Earth has undergone these natural disasters and wars, and the colonists are trying to get away, not just from the government itself, who wants to run and ruin their lives, but also from the corporations that in a lot of cases have more power than the governments. We have that scene where they're arriving at the spaceport, and there's PSAs being shown about build your own home and sew your own clothes and cook your own food. And that, basically they're welcoming people to the planet, letting them know you can do these things. Yeah. You don't need permission to live your lives anymore.
I love that little detail. That was a really nice touch in the airport scene.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as what's happening on Earth, that's how much I limited to. But once I settled on what we needed, I just kind of worked the history backwards, and I ended up with something that I really enjoyed, and this is one of the reasons that I really liked it. Talia now gets to carry God's gun. Browning's own in 1911.
Yes.
All the gun people will appreciate that. If you're not a gun person, don't worry about it.
Oh, cool. Done answering this slow, or not slow, this stopped image is completely messing with my head in sense of timing.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for being patient with me tonight. But hey, we got some more people in the comments. So hello to Melissa and Martin and Robert and Dan. We've got a whole bunch of people joining us today. And we've got and we also have Knight of Barsoom, so welcome. And We got an interesting comment from Robert Kelly just saying, off on a tangent. Recently, he rewatched Casablanca, greatest movie ever. But thinking of your writing and great female characters, how cool would a rewrite, of Casablanca be from Ilsa's viewpoint? Kind of gotta support it. So, you know something? I hate to admit this. I've never actually seen Casablanca, which is something I need to fix at some point. So I can't actually comment much on it. But if you have seen Casablanca and have comments to make, have at it.
Okay, so I'm not sure what he means by rewrite. Like something inspired by it would be, would have to be substantially different for IP reasons, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but if we're going to talk strictly about a rewrite of Casablanca, I agree that she's a very strong female character, but I'm almost afraid we would have a situation like in Forrest Gump, where the girlfriend takes advantage and dumps the guy. Because that's kind of what happens. She takes off with her husband and leaves Rick to face the Nazis on his own. So I'm not. I wouldn't be. It wouldn't be very. I don't know. Would that be a good character for people to relate to? What do you think, Heather?
Having not seen the movie, I can't give a really good answer, but I would say based upon what you've just said, I don't know that she's a character I could be sympathetic toward. I mean, it could make for an interesting movie. There are certainly interesting movies about unsympathetic characters, but yeah, I will leave it as saying it could be interesting, which is the most neutral of answers. But
I mean, you might have to rewrite the ending, or to make her more sympathetic in some way.
Yeah, something would have to be changed. Some sort of new detail would have to be added to tweak the story, depending upon what kind of story a person's trying to tell with that character. Because that, like the writer's goal, is obviously an important part too. But yeah, I'm making sure I haven't missed any other questions real quick. All right, no more questions. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and we will get to them. Let's see here. I think we've actually made it through most of my my early questions at this point. But my final one on my list, on my official list, you wrote your dogs into the book. And so I'm a Corgi-san and Despair Bear. You kept their names, even like the exact same names. And so I'm curious how much of the little robot dogs in the book, how much is derived from those actual dogs, personality-wise, or was it just the names that were taken? Also, tell us about the dogs, because the dogs are cool. I know about the dogs because I've read the book, but tell the viewers because they're neat.
So Corgi-san and Despair Bear are my dogs' stage names. It's not actually their names. It's what I call them online, because too many people, think that you use your pet's name for a password.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So Despair Bear and Corgi-san are their stage names, and the way they came about from their personalities. The Skye Terrier is Despair Bear. And if you want to know what a Skye Terrier looks like, it's a very long, stretch limo, short-legged terrier that looks like a mop. I took him into Home Depot, and the guy there said, "Ma'am, broom handles are on aisle 6." And I'm like, "Yes, thank you. Obviously, I'm here for a broom handle," because he looks like a mop.
So much like a mop, yeah.
Yeah, which is why in the book, the robot version of Despair Bear has this netting on him that catches stuff. So he looks like he's wearing a ghillie suit
looking thing.
Because of course he would be wearing a ghillie suit. We have a sniper in the story, so why not a dog with a ghillie suit?
Yes.
Corgi-san, on the other hand, is my Welsh cardigan corgi. That is the big corgi with the tail. And the reason that we called him Corgi-san is because he adopted the kamikaze lifestyle really early as a puppy, and has been trying to prove that he's a kamikaze. Well, you know what kamikaze is. Yes. Okay, so this dog has cost me more money. He's tried to bankrupt me. Okay. He does his own stunts. He has no fear. And he is just a phenomenal PIA. So that's why we call him Corgi-san. And these dogs are in the story for a reason. They are being used to survey the territory. They make recordings of the terrain and stuff, and they have radar and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them my own dog's personality traits. So, for example, the Skye Terrier. Have you ever watched Frasier?
I don't think so. I think I've seen like little clips of it.
Okay. Frasier's sister-in-law's name is Maris, and we never see her on screen, but she is portrayed as a very rich, very spoiled person whose main concern is her weight. She has some unrealistic goal for her weight and doesn't eat. She just eats. She lives on air. Well, Despair Bear was like that too. He was just not a big eater, which is a great contrast to Corgi-san, who is always hungry, because of course he is. So that's why in the story, Despair Bear doesn't take a full charge, because he won't sit on his charger long enough to take a full charge, and he's always running out of juice. Whereas Corgi-san will sit on his charger all day long and be very, very content just sitting there. So that's one of their personality quirks that I borrowed from my dogs and gave to the robots. And yes, there is a very good in-story technological reason why they are the way that they are, just in case anybody's wondering.
They're two of my favorites. I love them. I love every scene they pop up in.
Right.
We've got some audience questions here. Another one from Glenn, who asks, in a sense of the book, what music are you listening to? So I guess another way to phrase that, and again, clarify, Glenn, if this isn't what you mean, but what would your playlist for this book be? What music are you listening to that kind of guided or inspired the writing, or just provided vibes?
Probably Two Steps from Hell comes up on my Spotify playlist a lot. I listen to modern German Gothic musical.
That could be a whole other interview too.
So I listen basically to German show tunes a lot. Not necessarily when I'm writing, but when I'm thinking about writing. And a lot of stuff comes up that is like movie or gaming soundtracks that don't have words, because then I can concentrate better on what it is that I'm thinking about. So I have very eclectic tastes. I listen to that stuff. I also listen to Hungarian rap. Not by choice. Spotify threw it at me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is good. Wow.
I'm curious to check this out now, because I never in my life would have thought, you know what, I really need to listen to some Hungarian rap right now.
Believe me, I never thought I would either.
We'll have to trade recommendations. All right, let's see. Another question that we have from Martin Truther. Oh, this is a good one. What is one book the two of you would recommend that blends Western and sci-fi and samurai and Western? There's one that actually comes to mind to me, and I'm gonna have to Google the author's name for a second. So Monalisa, I will let you answer for a little bit while I actually look up this author's name. So what book would you recommend?
I'm really drawing a blank, to be perfectly honest with you. I have a recommendation, but it's not science fiction. I am actually rereading Daughter of the Empire, which is a historical fantasy, I think. So it's not set on Earth, but it has a lot of Japanese overtones. And I haven't run into any magic yet. I don't remember if there's any magic. It's by Feist and Wurst, Jenny Wurst. And I think it's a trilogy, actually. And that's really the only one that comes to mind that has that Western and samurai mix. There's also Setaganda by Lois McMaster Bujold, which
Ah.
isn't quite Japanese. It's more Chinese, I want to say, rather than Japanese. But if you think about it, Barayar and the Vor is the Japanese component, and Setaganda is the Chinese component.
Mm-hmm.
Not very much Western, but there are times when they go up in the mountains on a horse. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's the only two I'm thinking of. Did you find the info you were looking for?
Yes, I did. The one that I read is actually it's an indie book. The series is called Meiji Mysteries, and the first book is called Suicidal Samurai. It's by Sarah G. Rothman, and it hits all of those samurai western notes. Like the main character is actually a Japanese man who, if I recall correctly, went out west, but then and became a cowboy, but then came back to Japan, and so he's both cowboy and samurai, and he stumbles upon this plot, and there's just a lot of really good adventure. There's also a sort of really well organized comedy of errors element about it, where certain things, there's two separate casts and things just weave together really really well in it. But yeah, it's indie, so not a lot of people have read it, but it's a really fun book. Um, but yeah, that one's my favorite. Let's see here. Do we have? I think we don't have any more questions, and we're getting close to closing time. And we can actually, you know what? We can actually, since we started 10 minutes late, go 10 minutes past 9, if that's okay with you, unless you have somewhere to be, Mona Lisa.
No, it's good.
Nice. All right. So we finished most of my main questions. So again, everyone, if you have any more, continue asking. And also, there's still the contest that we're running, which I will put in the chat again if you want to enter. But you could win a signed copy of Threading the Needle, which I highly recommend. Let me put that in the chat one more time. And so, yeah, that link that just popped up is the document. So now I have all sorts of just generic writer questions that, I mean, yeah, they're generic, but also every writer has a different answer and I find them fun. So what does your average writing day look like? So do you have like writing rituals? Do you have a specific time of day that you like to write, or a favorite spot, or a favorite, I don't know, pen that you use? Like how do you go about it? What's a day like?
I'm usually up around 4 a.m. and I usually just make myself some coffee and sit down at the computer. And that is the time of the day when my brain is firing on all cylinders. Mm-hmm. And depending on which stage of writing I am in, I try. So, for example, if I'm in the planning stage or the editing stage, I don't worry so much about getting everything in that initial morning session. Mm-hmm. But if I'm actively writing new words, rather than cycling over the old ones or editing, then I try to get to the computer first thing, and I try to do it, and I often fail, but I try to do it without having looked at Signal or Facebook or Twitter or anything else. I try to just be fresh and in the story. And
I try to do that too. It makes such a huge difference if you do literally anything other than write first thing in the morning. Like I'm very analytical about my writing process, and I found that if I check Facebook or do anything like that in the morning before I write, it cuts my productivity down just so much.
I'm the same way. If I could just, the thing is, you can't ignore it as an author. You just don't have that option. And then trying to limit it, sometimes it's impossible, because so much of our collaborative efforts take place somehow require you to look at your phone or get on your computer. Mm-hmm. And like you, I'm very analytical. I am trying very hard to pants less and plan more. Mm-hmm. Because I'm trying just to increase my yearly word count and how many books I get out. I would like to be able to get at least 2 or 3 books out a year. Mm-hmm. Now, my Ravages of Honor novels are 160 words, 160,000 words. Mm-hmm. Those are big. I write really long books. So to be able to write 2 of those would be fantastic. I'm never going to be the kind of writer that can. I'm never going to be the kind of writer that's going to crank out a book every month or a book every couple of months.
I am amazed at those writers. Like, I can write pretty fast, but I see the people who turn out a book a month, and I'm just like, no, that would destroy me. I would no. I get stressed thinking about it.
I'm right there with you. I have no idea how they do it. There is a very stressful process of releasing the book, and I don't know that I could do new words and releasing a book, a different book at the same time. You do it though.
My past several books, I had a schedule that I was working on, and then I assumed, well, what I learned about myself is that I can write 40,000 solid words a month that don't require that much editing. And so I decided, you know what, I can predict how many words I can write. I'm going to do a rapid release schedule, one book every 3 months. And since these books are going to be 80,000 words long, I take 2 months to write, take a month to edit, and then release it. And that worked for the first two in the series. But then they started getting longer. And the last 3 books in the series, I was like, they were indie released. So I wasn't on the same kind of strict submission schedule that traditional authors are on. But there were every single one of those last 3 books, I was putting the final touches on like the day before I was supposed to submit the final document to Amazon. Like it was tough. And so trying to get everything written and edited and released within that short little window was just not fun.
Yeah, it becomes real work, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a significant amount of work, and I do both my writing and a lot of marketing for both me and my husband Jacob, and so that definitely piles onto it too. And I love both aspects, but there comes a point where like it's really hard to write and market at the same time, especially if you have a related release coming up. It's wild. So yeah,
it's a different mindset.
Oh yeah,
and it's not you don't have a character's head to get into. You have to get into the bragging mode.
Yeah,
it just completely different mindset.
There's still a significantly creative element to it, but it's definitely a different kind of creativity. Yeah.
Right.
You still with me? The sound went funny for a second.
Yes.
Okay, good. Woo. All right. So when did you start writing? Like, what made you want to be a writer in the first place?
Well, I think I picked up this insane mind virus sometime in high school. You laugh. Okay, I wrote a whole novel in high school. And I wrote another one in the summers in college. And I remember this was back in the days of when you had to put it in a box, self-addressed stamped return box. Yes. So it was a box within a box. I remember not being able to afford the postage.
Wow.
And that's why I put it aside and kind of stayed away from the whole writing thing for 20 some years. But I caught this virus basically in high school, and I dabbled a little bit in college, and then I got really busy with trying to actually get my degree and so on. And I came back to it a few years ago at the library. I was at the library with my kids, and I happened to run across this book called Samurai, which is one of those really large books that you put on a coffee table, and you need help lifting. And I checked it out at the library, and it kind of, I can do this now because my kids are old enough where they don't need me as much, and I can actually start doing things for myself again. And it's something I've wanted to do all of my life. It was just a matter of finding the right place in my life to fit it in. And that finally happened not so long ago.
When was your first book published? Like, how long have you been writing?
So I self-published in 2019. I made my first I made my first sale to Chris Rush 2017. That was Pretending to Sleep, the short story Pretending to Sleep.
I didn't realize it had been that recent.
Yeah.
All right, next question. I was waiting for the.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. We've established that the visuals are weird this time around. What are you reading at the moment?
I'm rereading The Daughter of the Empire.
Yeah, that's right.
By
You already
Feiston. My intent is to actually get through the trilogy this time and not get distracted by something shiny.
No, that's a tough thing for me. It occurs to me that I started Ravages of Honor and then didn't actually finish it because I got distracted by, I think I had to do some kind of research reading or something. I did love what I read, but it just occurred to me just in the middle of this interview now that I haven't actually finished your first book. Not first book, but I need to pick that back up again. I have a nasty habit of, I'll get halfway through a book and then just for whatever reason forget it exists. Like I have, no joke, 50 books on my Kindle that are just halfway done and I haven't picked them up again. Not because I don't enjoy them, but because my brain is just like, okay, we're reading this other thing now. We're doing this other thing now. And then I pick it up, 2 years later, and everything comes back and it's cool. But it's a weird little thing about my brain.
I'm the same way. I am the same way. I have a quarter finished, half. And again, a lot of it has nothing to do with anything bad. It's just I had to put it down to do this. I had to put it down to do and it just
Or it's sometimes you're just in the mood for a different kind of book. What I tend to do is I tend to have 3 or 4 different kinds of book going at the same time. So I'll have my nonfiction, I'll have my hard sci-fi, I'll have my fun pulpy sci-fi, and it's just whenever I read whatever the vibe is for that evening. And so gotta check my time. Okay, we still have a little bit of time. Let's see here. We've even made it through most of my other little questions. So we know Lee Brackett is one of your big influences. What other authors have influenced you significantly?
Well, I taught myself English by translating Heinlein.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a huge influence. Even if it's not in learning English, it was in just this idea of people being individuals. That I got through his books, because that was something that was new to me at the time. And so I read all of his juveniles and then moved on to the adult books. And that's kind of how I got into reading science fiction. And then the other person I think that has had probably the most influence is Lois McMaster Bujold. Yes. I remember getting the book club with the first Test of Honor. I believe it was called. It was the book before Barayar, chronologically the book before Barayar. Barayar is, I have destroyed several physical copies of Barayar. That's how often I have read it.
That's a good one.
And every time she would release a new book, I would go back to the beginning of the series and just read through it again.
Nice.
And I loved everything about the way that she wrote. She just had a very unique narrative style, which I did finally figure out what made her so different. So in terms of influence, not only the type of story, I mean, she writes space opera, but the way that she told it, the narrative choices that she made and how I'm telling it, I took that and I put it on steroids.
Nice. Yeah, I actually just started reading Bujold within the past year or two, and I am not a fast reader in general. Well, obviously, if it takes me 2 years to finish a book, but I find myself just plowing through anything of hers that I start. Like I finish it in a week, which is phenomenal for me. She's become one of my new favorites too.
And not only that, but you ask what was the book about, and you're like, you can't sit down and just give a chronological.
They're complex and they're complex in unexpected ways, and so much of the complexity is not necessarily in the plot, but in what's going through the characters' heads.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I find so delightful about her stuff.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Bujold book?
Barayar. And Civil Campaign probably would be my second, then Setaganda and Memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I could
my list.
Yeah. A Civil Campaign is awesome. Really
nice. And she's got so many to read too. I feel slightly overwhelmed thinking of all the books of hers that I have to make it through. But at the same time, it's not a bad problem to have lots of books by a good author to read.
You just need time. You need somebody to sell you time.
I need to actually sit down and read. See, my thing is I get wiggly. I like to move around. And while I do like the idea of curling up, with a coffee or a hot chocolate and a book, I'll get 2 pages in and it's like I need to move and do something. I really like audiobooks for that reason, for example, because I will just put an audiobook on and do chores and knock out a book and knock out chores. But yeah. So all right. Oh, continue.
No, I get that. I totally get that because I have the same problem. I'll read it. At least I'm reading more than one paragraph at a time, which is what was happening when I was raising the kids, right? I've read this paragraph 6 times already.
Yeah, I remember I taught 8th grade English for a year, and I want to say I was so tired at the end of every day that I might have read a single book, not out just for myself. Obviously I was reading for when I was teaching, but I maybe read a paragraph a day and it was exhausting. There's no time for anything except teaching and stressing.
I agree. I see that.
We have an observation from Robert Kelly here. It says, where'd it go? Miles is the achievable hero we could all become despite our cultural obstacles and more relevant today than when written. Something, I am really astonished at how despite their age, they have aged really well. At least the ones that I've read, in terms of their themes and whatnot, which, I mean, that's true of all great literature, it ages well. But yeah, that's there are certain elements that I read and I'm like, oh, this feels like it was written somewhat recently.
I think her series is gonna be one of those timeless things that becomes a classic.
Oh yeah.
Because the characters stay with you, the milieu stays with you, and it's the kind of thing where you will go back to it and read it again and again. You know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter. You're there to go to be with the characters.
Yeah, it's like going to excuse me, my tongue's getting all tied up. She's one of those writers where going back to read her characters feels like you're going back to visit friends. And that's not something that happens often with books. Like a lot of books I will read and enjoy and then forget. But some characters I actively miss, and those are the ones I go back to all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we are at 9:10, so we have been chatting for an hour, and this has been so fun. Thank you for joining me on this. And again, you guys, Monalisa will be sending a signed book out, so if you want to try to win that, go into the document I posted a link to, enter the information there, and we will draw a winner. But it's Threading the Needle, available now from Baen Books. Go buy all the copies. And Monalisa, do you have anything else you want to add before I close this out?
I just want to thank you for inviting me to come talk to you. I was looking forward to this so much, and it was great. Thanks for letting me talk about my books. And again, I appreciate it. This was a thrill. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining me again. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Everyone have a good night.